It is a rather chilly morning here at Brands Hatch, but at least it is dry, unlike yesterday, so things are improving slightly as we get set for free practice for the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Sprint Cup's opening round. Of course, the endurance season kicked off at Monza a few weeks back, but here we are with the opening round of the Sprint Cup and a mighty 29-strong entry. And around the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, this is going to be very intense indeed. You can see what the weather is like. Chilly is the general premise of all of this. It is dry, but it's a bit like being at a winter race meeting. You need your big thick coat, your hat, your scarf. Well, hopefully the sun might break through, but I'm sure when we get to May, it'll all... Oh no, hang on, it is. Well, for the teams, it's going to be a pretty cold track surface to kick off the day, and this is a chance for some of the drivers new to Brands Hatch, some of the drivers new to the cars to get used to the general feel of it. Gemma Scott is in the pit lane, David Addison and John Watson trackside. Watty returning to a fantastic circuit.
Wonderful Brands Hatch, but it's more March-like weather than it is May-like. I mean, 10 Celsius track, 9.1 ambient. Well, I just had to sort of knock the icicles off my car before I left it. But it's going to brighten up. We're expecting a lovely Saturday afternoon here at Brands Hatch. Blue skies, 21 Celsius. And I'm sure everybody in the pit lane is looking forward to seeing track temperatures and ambience rise, because a cold ambient track, whatever day at Brands, easy to catch out those that aren't yet fully awake. And some of them got out of bed this morning and their hotel, and they had no electricity apparently.
Is that right?
So no showers.
Good Lord.
No breakfast. No nothing. So anyway, they're all here moaning.
I'll just check my
about
sympathy
how
out.
hard up they are.
Yeah.
But we'll soon see whether they are fully awake, fully alert for the challenge of Brands Hatch. 2.4 miles around, 9 turns, 3.9 kilometers. And yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic racetrack. It seems to have shrunk, but I think that's because the scale of motor racing in the last 30, 40 years has expanded so much. Everything seems to have shrunk.
Cars get wider. You can't widen the circuit particularly. You just saw one of the new teams, incidentally, Nova Race, which is here with the Honda NSX, which is really good to have on track. Well, you're looking down then from overlooking the Brabham Straight over the start line into the pit lane. Before we get the cars on track, John, let's have a look at Brands Hatch.
So here's the tracker. Brands Hatch, 9 principal corners, 2.4 miles, 3.9 kilometers, and a real test of skill and courage, commitment from all 29 competitors here this weekend. Lap record 1 minute 9.5. That was set on the circuit in its previous configuration. Principally, as you came down from Druid, you went into what was then known as Bottom Bend, now known as Graham Hill Bend. It is much slower than it was when it was Bottom Bend. So 1 minute 9.593. I think that might have been Senna set that time. His pole time in 1985 actually was a lot quicker. A more relevant pole time was set in 1977 when at a race here called the Race of Champions. The pole time then, and this is where we maybe look to see where a GT3 car is 46 years down the road, a 1:19.05.
Okay.
And that was on the same configuration as the circuit we've just been talking about before they altered Bottom Bend into Graham Hill Bend.
And it's the end of this sentence where I say, and who set that, John? And you say, well, it was me, David.
That's right.
Imagine my surprise.
That's right.
Now, we are still getting a little bit used, although we did have 9 hours of it at Kyalami and 3 at Monza, talking about WRT and BMW. Valentino Rossi is back with Vincent Voss's team for another season, but of course he moves now to BMW, and in the familiar colours, the familiar 46 number adorns the side. He has got a new co-driver for this year because Maxime Martin goes back to BMW, for whom he won the Spa 24 Hours in the BMW Z4 era, for whom he drove in the DTM. And if Valentino Rossi wants a good coach, well, he's got one in Maxime Martin, hasn't he?
And he's got an absolutely fantastic car. This BMW, the M4, it is, I think, probably the most sophisticated of the GT3 cars in the paddock. If you get a chance to see one of them with the body panels off, I mean, where does the touring car end and where does the sort of silhouette race car begin? It is absolutely phenomenal. But there, the AMG Mercedes-AMG GT3, which has really been the sort of the class of the field, although Audi have won the championship. But the Mercedes has been such a fantastic all-round turnkey vehicle, much more aligned to what you might see if you went into your Mercedes dealer to buy an AMG GT3 Black, which is the road version of the competition car.
From Australia, Caelan Williams comes to WRT with Nicholas Krudsen, who was a winner in BMWs, but for the Schubert team in the German Championship last year. Caelan Williams was the Australian Formula 3 champion back in 2017. He was 5th last year in the FIA Formula 2 Championship, so very much a sideways step, but still at the top level of the sport in terms of GT3, but from very nearly the top of single-seaters, moving across to GT cars. So he's new to this circuit, and Nicholas Krudsen, I don't think, has raced here before, even though he's done a lot of miles in single-seaters or GT cars. The fast lane is open as we now have the final couple of minutes before this session gets underway. Fascinating fact of the morning is, I know we're looking ahead a bit for qualifying, but being at the front is perhaps more important here than anywhere else, because Brands Hatch Sprint Cup winners have only ever come from the top 3 on the grid.
Well, just going back to the comment, the observation I made that I said Brands Hatch appears to have shrunk. It hasn't shrunk. Yep. But what has changed is that the scale, the size of racing cars, looking at the gorgeous Ferrari 296, I mean, everything in the pit lane is enormous.
Yeah, you're right.
And therefore, if you go back 46 years or whenever I was talking about, the size of a car at that point was maybe 2/3 of where we are with these current GT3 cars. So the effectiveness is 2 cars side by side going into Paddock Hill Bend. There ain't any more room for a third car. And if a third car tries to elbow its way in, inevitably one of the 3 is going to end up in the gravel on the outside or in the tire bales on the exit on the inside on the way up to Druids.
Well, as the session is very nearly live, then you can see there the Lamborghinis. We've got Lamborghini from the VSR team, Vincenzo Sospiri's squad, and Yuki Nemoto partnered with Rolf Ineichen for the Sprint Cup season. Rolf Ineichen, very, very quick businessman racer. It's a little bit unfair, really, to call him an AM. He's a silver grade, but he has done a lot of miles over the last few seasons. Right, before we get cars on track, let's hear from 1 or 2 drivers. Thomas Neubauer has been a winner here in the past. He's with Gemma.
Thomas, we were just saying how much we like the car as we were coming to the interview there, but it's great to see you back racing with the championship, a step up this year into the pro class, and a circuit here that you've raced on in the past. What do you think of the Brands circuit? What's it like?
I mean, I obviously have very great memories back from 2019 with Nico Bastian. We won the first race overall, being silver still. So I have very good memories. Not happened the same last year with Benji. We had an issue in the first race that compromised basically all the weekend. So really looking forward to this weekend. I love this track. I think this place is amazing. Thanks to Valley, we have a lot of people, so the mood will be crazy. And then yeah, really looking forward to drive this McDonald beauty, especially in pro class. So yeah, can't wait to get the car.
From a driver's point of view, what's it like as you go down into Paddock Hill Bend? Because that really is a special feeling.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday we did again the driver track walk, sorry, and actually in the car you don't realize how downhill and uphill this track is. So in the car we don't really feel that. Basically working there, we were like, oh, that's crazy. It's like a second radio. It's crazy. So
well, we're looking forward to the action on track. Thank you.
Here in the background, the team's hard at work, and tyres being fitted, and the cars now making their way to the end of the pit lane. Now, the start of this first session is for the bronze and silver drivers only, which gives me a chance just to mention that although, of course, everybody is in GT3 spec machinery, there is your green flag. Session is live. The categorisation is based on driver grading, so you've got this weekend pro, gold and silver. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a bronze cup within regulations for sprint, but you won't have it here nor at Zandvoort because the length of the lap is short, the pit lane is short, there just isn't the space to have another categorisation within the event. So you've got 3 classes, there are 15 pros, there are 5 golds, there are 9 silvers, the session is live, and BMW's blast down the pit lane.
So it'll be an exploratory lap for a number of the drivers. I mean, they were here yesterday. Many of them will have taken the opportunity to walk, maybe some might have even bicycled, but
or run.
Yes, even run. But most of them will probably be on a simulator.
Yes.
And they will have simulated a lap at Brands Hatch. But what the simulator doesn't give you is the reality of the approach into Paddock Bend, for example. And it's a blind apex, so you have to commit before you actually see the apex. And then it's the falling off the edge of a cliff as you drop down into the compression of the... I mean, all those... I mean, here we are coming through Westfield, through Dingledale. Again, the camera doesn't actually illustrate just how much of a dip there is. Dingledale Corner, which, well, in fact, it's now better known as Sheen Curve after the great British motorcycle world champion Barry Sheen, then out of Stirling's, and then the run down into what I think is still, I call it Clearways, but it's Clearways the first part. Second part is called Jim Clark Curve. This is Clearways, and now going in, this is Jim Clark Curve. I mean, it's a really wonderful racetrack, and I've got, I mean, wonderful fond memories of racing here. One of the best times, actually, was in a little Formula 2 Chevron. The perfect balance of weight, size, horsepower, and you could hustle that you-know-what out of that little Chevron, and it gave you, the trouble was, you're on Firestone tyres, put so much load into the sidewall of the tire, you got a thing called chatter, and you had to back out of it, otherwise it would have shaken the car apart.
Yuki Inamoto you're looking at, coming up towards 30s. One of the things perhaps that the camera doesn't always illustrate is just how much elevation there is around here. Yes, you climb now from the so-called Indy circuit to the Grand Prix circuit. You come over this brow. The vehicle bridge that goes over the top of the road actually looks incredibly low as you head under it, and you drop downhill. But now, this next little bit up towards Hawthorne, that's a pretty steep climb as well.
It is. It's much, again, it's only by walking the racetrack, there is an incline as the cars, you see the change of tarmac as you come into Hawthorne. That actually helps slow the car down. So when you come off the throttle, it automatically slows down a little bit more than it would do if you're on the straight and level. So you'll go down certainly one gear, and you may have a little sort of dab, light dab on the brake, but you can carry a lot of speed into Hawthorne. But you need to make sure that your entry is accurate, because if you get wide on the exit, there isn't a lot of room, and right now all the grass around the side of Brands Hatch is wringing wet from the rain that fell on Friday. So you get onto that grass, well, the sort of retardation ain't going to be there.
No.
A lot more gravel I'm just noticing here. Is that a change for 23 on the outside of Clearways and Clark Curve? Looks like they've extended the gravel traps. Even here, almost at Paddock, it looks like they've been extended to give more runoff in the event of a driver getting it wrong. Might be an illusion from the commentary booth.
Possibly. It wasn't something I was thinking about last week, but you might be right, sort of Clearways into Clark Curve area. There's barely any grass there now. It's all gravel, isn't it?
The gravel trap runs all the way, sort of almost about a third of the way down the pit lane.
Yeah.
So I think it's been extended. The camera made it look like that it was deeper, looking at it from the commentary booth where we can see all the way to Clearways and Clark Curve. I mean, there's a sea of sand. There's more sand now there than there is in Brighton Beach, I reckon.
It's like being at Zandvoort, isn't it? Times in this session, weather permitting, won't affect the grid, but what they are providing is interest, and it is a Mercedes that is the fastest currently. I'll offer you the time just because Jesse Salmanagio, who is new to GT3 racing this year, having driven in the Asian Le Mans and the German Prototype Cup last season, he has gone quickest aboard the Mad Panda Mercedes, and then Alex Arca is second, so it's Mercedes from Audi. The margin is 11/10. Valentino Rossi is third. Sean Hudspeth in the Ferrari, the Singaporean driver who we have seen race in this country before in Carrera Cup GB, but he spent the last few seasons in Italian GT racing. Sean Hudspeth is fourth, Frank Bird fifth, Finlay Hutchison sixth at the moment, but all these are of academic interest, and it's going to be a shuffled order once the pro cars come out anyway.
And Frank Bird has just got that little bit quicker by 1.1 seconds, so 1:25.1. I mean, effectively that's his second flying lap. And I reckon that's pretty impressive on a circuit that is still, temperature-wise, really cold. It's been well washed from the rain that fell here yesterday, so there's little rubber down. I know you were here the weekend before, another major sporting event, British touring cars, so they laid down loads of rubber. Not necessarily Pirelli. I don't know what you guys are running on touring cars.
Goodyear.
Goodyear. Well, Goodyear and Pirelli are a nice marriage, but not necessarily in terms of grip on a racetrack.
And again, as you say, a lot of that will have been washed away also. Now, Frank Bird for 77 Mercedes. This is the car for Haupt that he shares with Jordan Love, the Australian Carrera Cup champion. That's the fastest, or it was, because now to the top of the times goes 69. You're looking at 119 Lamborghini, just quickly to tick off the Christian Clean, Dean McDonald, sorry, I'll try again, the Baptiste Moulin, Marcus Pavarud, entry, but the fastest driver, Thierry Vermeulen, who is the son of Max Verstappen's manager, Raymond Vermeulen, and that car is the fastest now, and it's the Ferrari.
And it's not just a Ferrari, David, it's a Ferrari 296. Now, we saw them, you weren't at Monza, we watched them at Monza, and we were disappointed.
Okay.
Because the performance that we had anticipated at Monza, it came in the race, but not in qualifying. Great to see a Ferrari in that short. In fact, Frank Bird's gone even quicker again, a 124.7. So as we're speaking, literally by the lap, by the flying lap, the times are falling quite quickly.
Absolutely so, and it's a busy track, bearing in mind that this is, in quotes, only bronze and silver, but there are 20 cars that are within this element of the session. Yuki Nomoto, who was the first out, is down to 10th in number 163 Lamborghini, the Huracan GT3 Evo 2, so it's a new car for this season, and Lamborghini, of course, with new factory drivers, amongst them Jordan Pepper, that will come to when the pros hit the track, coming out all guns blazing once more. The car that has been out but not yet done a time is the Lamborghini of GSM's Nicolas Resitano, the silver-graded Italian driver, but Nomoto is on a bit of a mission here, although Frank Bird has done another absolute best within the first sector. On board with the Japanese driver now.
So where we go down through that's out of what was called Sheen Curve into Stirling's, just trying to get a location. So the final run down, this is a short straight before you turn into clearways, and here you should be able to turn the car, nail it, get the pot, let the car run out wide, then bring it back for Clark Curve, and then coming up after turn 9 to complete another lap. So 1 minute, well, the clock's still running in fact, so we don't know what that time. We've only got sectors 1 and that's all vanished. In the meantime, all the way up into Druids, slightly wider, taking a rather maybe a more unusual entry and exit, but we're going to stay on board of the Lamborghini for a lap into Graham Hill Bend. Be careful on the outside, because without doubt track limit abuses are going to be nailed here all weekend. So through, this is going through with the call, it is called Surtees after John Surtees, who should really have been Sir John Surtees, but that's a subject for another day. Now, down the hill, Pilgrim Strip into Hawthorns. Let the car run wide on the exit. There's plenty of space there, but don't abuse it. Then the short sprint into Westfield. A lot of curb on the inside that you can take, but it's lumpy and bumpy. Then the dip down Dingledale, then back into Sheen Curve again. A lot of curb on the inside. That's permitted. The curbing on the exit of corners, where you run wide on the exit, that's where penalties are going to come. Exit of Stirling's, there's not a lot you can do because the grass runs right up to the edge of the racetrack, except for about a foot or so, and then back again into Clearways, and then through Clark Curve to complete another lap. So wait to see the timing and scoring, what we get in terms of a time. 1:25.108. That brings the Lamborghini and Nomoto up into 5th place.
Valentino Rossi's BMW heading up towards the timing line, and that car is currently 6th fastest, of course, and as Neubauer touched on this, lots and lots of people will be here tomorrow to cheer him on. They were here yesterday around the paddock trying to catch a glimpse of the great man for an autograph, and up towards Druids he comes.
And he's gone 2nd quickest.
He has.
So it was a sort of a bit of a curate's egg event for him at Monza a month ago. Had a shunt in qualifying on the Saturday, backed it into the Tower Bales at now called Alboreto Curve. Anyway, we'll leave it there. And in the race itself, held a very strong position, but then had a spin, and it all went sort of pear-shaped thereafter.
And he will make his debut at Le Mans, not in the 24 hours, but in the support race Le Mans Cup this year. So in the event centenary, even more attention to be placed upon the event. All right, Valentino Rossi has gone quicker again in the first sector of this lap. Baptiste Moulin has now gone to the top for VSR in his Lamborghini. So you've got Lamborghini and then Mercedes, because that lap time has just been taken away.
He did a 1:10.
Right.
I thought 1:10, I mean, sign the guy up, he's a genius.
Yeah.
It was obviously an error, but so still Frank Bird and the Mercedes AMG GT3, and then Valentino Rossi currently 2nd, but he's got personal best 1st and 2nd. He could go quickest. overall presently.
He could. Frank Bird's sitting in the pit lane, not able to respond. Rossi's third sector has not come up. It has now, but it was a slower third sector. A 1:24.194 is a personal best lap from Valentino Rossi, but it doesn't put him to the top, but it does narrow the margin, as there, sitting in the pit lane, is the Frank Bird Aston Martin.
No, a Mercedes, actually.
Sorry, did I say Aston Martin?
I know, but, look, it was subliminal. It was totally subliminal. But the car I want to watch, actually, is the Ferrari of Vermeulen, because he's gone purple first sector, green second sector, waiting to see what he does when he completes a flying lap. Currently 8th quickest.
Have a look on the bonnet, just to explain. You've got an Australian Jordan Love, hence the kangaroo, and Frank Bird's family. His grandfather, Frank Bird, is a poultry farmer. That's what John is imitating. It's not a GT3 on the rev limiter. Do it again.
I'm going to do it twice.
Oh, okay.
Too much of a good thing.
All right. His zebra impression later on is well worth staying around for. Anyway, that's the reason for the animals on the front of the car. This, in super slow-mo, is Valentino Rossi coming up through Sheen Curve into Stirling's. Now, if you are students of GT World Challenge Europe, you'll remember that the exit of Stirling's has caught people out in the past. Yesterday, at the team manager's briefing, Alain Adon was saying, the race director was saying to the teams, tell your drivers not to run too wide, because the wider they go, the more the chances are of being spat across the road into that barrier on the left. You can see there's limited runoff on either side. So the message was getting through, at least to the teams, to pass on to the drivers. Keep off the curb as best you can, because you're putting yourself in jeopardy by doing that.
You know what? Alain Adon is a fantastic race director, but for Brands Hatch, I would like an old schoolmaster type. Someone like, I mean, nobody who is listening to this broadcast has ever heard of Jimmy Edwards, but there's a great radio program back in the 50s called The Wacko! And he was the head of a private school, and he was always whacking the kids. You know. Oh, well, anyway, that's the kind of director. Wacko, if you make a mistake, the wacko you'll get will be into the barriers, not from a nice springy bit of cane. So you've got to respect this racetrack. It does not take prisoners, and if you go off, you'll damage your car heavily, and that would mean an additional amount of work for you and for the team, and could actually mean that you may not be able to get the race. So it is important to listen to what Alain Adon says.
Something else just to factor in while you're looking at this. Obviously, this is a pit stop. There are 29 cars in the race. It is going to be a very busy pit window. Now, bear in mind this. Your pit box in width is 6 meters, right? That's the space you've got for your car. And the longest GT3 car is 5 meters. That means it's going to be a very snug pit lane. They all have to do the pit stops like this, in other words, nose to tail, not nose in at 45 degrees. But the chances are that within that window, or if there were to be a full course yellow or safety car and everybody pitted at the same time, it would be mighty, mighty crowded.
Well, again, referring back to Monza, similar problem, 55 car entry at Monza. It meant that wherever you were in the pit lane, you had neighbours on one side and on the other side. And I know, because I've spoken to team principals and team managers, that they spoke to one side and the other to say, look, we are thinking of coming in roughly at 59 minutes in the hour, or 60, 62, whatever it was. Can we work together? And of course, yeah. But when it actually came to it, sorry. So I mean, here at Brands it'll be a similar kind of thing. Let's look at the Dynamic Motorsport Porsche. You've got to work with your neighbours and give yourself working space. So where are we with that time? Well, so Delessa has only just, he's on his 4th lap, currently 20th, but that's irrelevant. So let's wait and see what this magnificent piece of Stuttgart, Zuffenhausen, Weissach, whatever you want to say, they're all made in that general location around Stuttgart.
So to the timing line comes Adrian Delina, fully recovered from that back jarring accident when he rattled over the curb at Misano a couple of years ago. He breaks the beam now, and that's a proper flying lap from him. It takes a while for the lap time to come up, but he's up to 18th on a 1:27.984. A little bit of amalgamation, effectively, of 2 teams this year, Dynamic Motorsport and the Huber Racing team, which is one of the front runners in one-make Porsche races. They had people, for example, at Silverstone earlier in the week testing for the Super Cup starts of the season, and they're looking down over Surtees, which takes you onto the Grand Prix loop. It's just a proper circuit.
I mean, look, I don't want to get emotional about it, but this is what I grew up with, racetracks. that were like this. I mean, this is the nearest racetrack that we have in Great Britain to what I would have called a full-on road racetrack. And in fact, road racing in England, well, England, Wales and Scotland, in fact, was prohibited. It was only in Northern Ireland that you could have road racing, as they did at Dundrod or other wonderful, still do with motorcycles. But that is, I mean, that's just a picture.
Yeah, it is, yeah. You can also see, of course, how residential life has spread and sprawled closer and closer to the circuit. Right, back to the track, round the back garden, and down towards Clearways comes Adrian Delina. One or two more heading for the pit lane now, including Lucas Lederer. Alex Arca's Audi is up into second in the times now. This margin to Frank Bird, it was quite a big gap early on, but it's coming down and down and down. Over the timing line goes Delina, and he goes quicker still now, up to 17th fastest, 126.765. Now, replay, this is Surtees, this is onto the Grand Prix loop, and that's an Audi getting all crossed up. Alex Arca at the wheel of it.
Not normally a part of the racetrack you would run wide. The car looked, as we've had that head-on view of it, looked pretty reasonable on the sort of early part of the exit. Maybe just a little bit of concentration looking down at something. You don't want to run wide at the minute anywhere because of the rain that fell on Friday and everything around the racetrack that is green is very, very wet underfoot and slick tires, and that's now there possibly. Now, if that had been a qualifying session, for sure, that would have been a lap deletion because Alex Arca ran, he's gone quickest overall, by the way, 123.3 by 9 thousandths of a second. But that lap, or the lap time he's currently on, would come under investigation and may well be a deleted lap time. He ran too wide on the exit of Graham Hill Bend, and the advantage of doing it can repay in terms of a couple of tenths of a second a lap. So you've got to drive within the track limits, and certainly where there are runoff areas, respect them. 2 wheels off is fine. 4 wheels over the white line, that's going to be a deleted time.
Now, of course, at Brands Hatch, at places like Graham Hill Bend or the outside of Paddock, there are these pressure pads, so it's not purely done by the human eye. The car takes a photograph, a bit like your speed camera. If you're speeding, click. Well, here, if the weight of the car goes onto the pressure pad, click, there's the photograph, there's the evidence. Now, that doesn't explain, of course, how you got there. Did you lose control? Were you exceeding track limits deliberately? Did you get a tap? But it does show whether you were over the line. But also now, there is the GPS system operated by Swiss Timing, the timekeeping service, and that also now has the capability to show if the car was outside the limit of the track. You walk into the timekeeping room now, it feels like they're on a coach trip because there's another army of people all studying laptops, all for the dreaded track limits.
I mean, listen, all this sort of additional paraphernalia isn't necessary if competitors exercise discipline. Back in the good old days when Brands Hatch, going back those 46 years when I was discussing the Race of Champions, there wasn't that level of runoff. If you went wide in a corner, got onto the grass, there was a very stout railway sleeper banking, and that hurt to hit it. I know, the thing. So all the work that's been done by the racetrack to give drivers more areas of safety, drivers then take advantage of it. As we look at the NSX Honda, great to see these back in competition. I think it is a stunning, oh, dear me. Now there's an experience because he didn't quite know where the pit lane tightened, it nips a little bit.
Unless that was a late call from the pit crew to say box this lap, and he was a bit late. Let's have another look, John. Let's see.
It looked as if he was going to go on to it, and then all of a sudden out of it, and you can see he's gone across that line. I don't know whether that would be in a race or certainly in an official session. This is really more just a learning session for those bronze and silver drivers. It could have been a late call, David. You could be right on that, but certainly didn't quite get it right on the entry into the pit lane.
Quick conflab between the drivers, and then they will be dispatched for the remainder of this session. We're still in the bronze and silver only segment, and we've got 39 minutes on it to go. Now, Alex Arca, we've not told you, but despite the zealotry coming out of Surtees, has put himself to the top of the times. He did a 123.347. He's 900ths quicker than Frank Bird.
Lorenzo Patrese will be getting into the car, and he did an outstanding job in pre-qualifying in Monza because there was a compromise on qualifying. on the Sunday morning due to circumstances. That time Lorenzo Petresi was the pole time. As we now see Thierry Vermeulen runs wide at the bottom of paddock. Bend needs to be careful because he's not a million miles away from getting penalised for that. But as I mentioned, the Ferrari 296, this is the future for Ferrari and GT3 racing. Again, very, very wide coming through Graham Hill Bend, and sort of, well, and Audi runs wide up at Sheen. You like a bit of drifting, David. How's that? Hey,
that is good.
That is brilliant. I mean, well held, that man.
It is a good save, isn't it?
That is outstanding.
And that's which of the ComTU? I think it's Finlay Hutchison, isn't it? Number 21 it is. So the Scottish driver having a big, big slide. Just going back to the track limit warnings, the information is provided to the teams as to how many warnings their car has had. So the majority are on 0, which is good, but Alex Arca has had 2 track limit warnings. And when you get to 4, you're heading towards penalties.
Well, on that last lap, Thierry Vermeulen, he improved up to 4th quickest, but I saw certainly 2 situations which would have been, let's have a little look and see again, just to measure whether that was sufficiently within or sufficiently outside. Let's go back to Frank Bird, the man who had been the dominant driver in the opening phases of this 30-minute session.
Right, nose to tail in the traffic now. This is going to be a talking point for qualifying and the race, that you get mired in traffic. It compromises the lap completely. And I think now Frank Bird has backed out of it because he knows he's not going to get past. He knows he's not going to improve. That blue background, by the way, to the numbers says that he is one of the drivers within the Silver Cup.
So he has to restart all over again, having caught up to the tail of the Honda and another car. So here we go. You can see 2.1 seconds he dropped off the pace. He was fractionally down in the first sector anyway, but it was the middle sector that he realized, just forget about it, back off. And that's driver thinking about there's no point in trying to race someone, because all I'm going to do is go slower. I'm going to waste my tires, I'm going to waste effort. So again, the pace that the Mercedes is running at, he's probably going to catch the back of the Honda more or less before he concludes this flying lap that he's on.
One or 2 teams being warned about speeding in the pit lane, one of which, incidentally, was the Honda that we saw having its slightly wayward entry. Well, that was clocked at 50.3 kilometres an hour when Jacopo Guidetti brought it in. Right, so Frank Bird hustling on. He knows his way around Brands Hatch from GT, from single-seaters, also from rallies, because he's been a pretty rapid competitor in the Motorsport News Circuit Rally Championship, which is effectively a single-venue rally series. His dad is a competent rally driver too, with some success. And out of Stirling's comes Frank Bird. Came out of Ginetta Juniors into Formula 4, into Formula Renault, and then went the GT route, initially with the Team Parker Bentley back in 2020. But he gets better all the time, and won't be an improver on this lap, looking at the sectors. But interesting that he is taking charge of the car for this early part of the session.
Here's about just under 3/10 down. This is the lap you've just been watching, on his current quickest lap of 123.4. So on the timing and scoring, we could see there was no green or purples coming up, indicating either a personal best or a fastest sector time overall. So again, here we go. And again, that Graham Hill Bend is going to be the bogey corner here throughout the weekend for the entire field.
Yeah, and I fear the track limits will continue to be a talking point. Alex Arca, for example, the quickest man in the session, is already up to 3. Now, how about this? Just to illustrate how competitive GT3 racing is, you can see it on the timing tower, but Alex Arca and Frank Bird separated now by just 0.09 of a second. That is how close it is. The gaps, in other words, tiny, tiny, tiny. You go back a little bit further, there are 12 thousandths separating cars, and now the pros are getting ready to go.
Yes, there is the 32. Dries van Thor and Charles Vets. What a formidable partnership these two have had over previous seasons when they were part of the WRT Audi driver lineup. Now they've changed to BMW, and it's a significant change, because the characteristic of an Audi, for example, vis-a-vis looking here at a BMW, M4 GT3. The idea is the kind of race car that would be much more on the nose, a front-endy car. The BM is probably not quite that way, and it's taking a little bit of adaptation. Primarily, I understand it's in being able to get the front tire temperature working in the optimum temperature range. But I mean, overall, the BM is, I reckon, is just a phenomenal bit of engineering.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this before, haven't we, from different brands. They sort of pick a season almost and say, right, now we're going to concentrate on the GT3 program, and they arrive all guns blazing. They're not there to make up the numbers. We've seen it in the past with Mercedes AMG or with Audi, with Aston Martin, with Bentley, and now BMW, having run different GT programs before, is very definitely committed to the idea of dominating GT3 this year, and 32 is set to go. So they will be imminently on track.
David, this is a front-engined GT car, BMW's M4 GT3. Where is the motor? It is in the front somewhere, yeah. But where is it? Because all you see is this carbon fiber extrusions, but where's the motor? Well, it's probably halfway into the driver cockpit. And all the bodywork around it is all there for purely aerodynamic benefits and gains, as well as obviously the front radiator cooling. But the way the air is ducted out, you can see the radiator, then the ducting that diverts the air to flow around the car in a specific manner, and then all the way around the side and over and under the rear wing, plus, of course, the rear diffuser.
They are going to have, in this session, the pro teams, 30 minutes. Now, it could be that they just keep those 30 minutes for one driver, but behind all of this is the question of how much are they going to learn. And bear in mind as well that it's a tough championship, this. There's limited testing. No testing yesterday, for example. The track was live. Only the Indy circuit, only for club race, support race teams. So this is the first time the cars, the drivers, the teams have been on track this weekend. And for the pro teams, they've got 30 minutes, and it'll be less than that when they hit the track.
I mean, they will get into a program very, very quickly, but nevertheless, like the bronze and silver drivers we've been watching, they still have to pick up the rhythm of the racetrack. Now, if you're a pro driver, it shouldn't take you more than 3 or 4 laps to get that rhythm back. But the difference, for example, with WRT is they did it for the last 6, 7, 8 seasons with an Audi. They're doing it with a BMW.
Yeah. There, 14 is the Emil Frey Racing Ferrari 296. That is the car of Giacomo Altue and Constant Lapalainen. So Emil Frey, another team switching brands for this year, away from Lamborghini to Ferrari. And they're not doing that for optimism, they're doing that for results.
Well, if you think back to Iron Lynx, who were the Ferrari team last year, they're now the Lamborghini team. And Emil Frey, who were the Lamborghini team, are now... I think there are other sort of scenarios behind the switch by the two teams from one brand to another. Raffaele Marcello. Well, there's not much more you can say about that than say Raffaele Marcello,
who is becoming quite a regular in the UK, because on top of everything else, he's now racing in British GT. So he's had Alton Park and Silverstone on his CV already this year.
I hope he's getting a bit of a British sense of humour.
Well, he has a view on British policing with regards to dogs, if you look at his social media feed, in light of what's been happening this week. But we'll come back to that maybe in due course. As there, into the pit lane comes the number 69 Emil Frey Racing, Thierry Vermeulen and Albert Costa. Red Bull backed Ferrari. The Red Bull connection, because it's Verstappen.com Racing, because Thierry's dad manages Max Verstappen. You can draw all the parallels, make all the links, but Thierry Vermeulen has established himself as a pretty decent GT driver in a very short space of time.
Yeah, and as you can see, the name on the side of the car sort of getting everywhere in motorsport these days. As the first of the McLarens makes its way, I guess the JP Motorsport makes its way down, and that will be Christian Clean and Dean McDonald. So Christian Clean taking that car out, and McLaren again look very, very competitive indeed at Monza, as they have been also in British GT this season. 2 races, one at Alton Park earlier, and then at Silverstone last weekend.
Now the McLaren is, again, a developed car from last year. Last year, one of its issues was that it was difficult to get the car to rotate. It had a bit of understeer. A lot of work has been done to dial that out, and there is a lot more optimism about it. Where the teams that operate them are still a little bit, not nervous, maybe that's too strong a word, but they do make the point that the car is great at the end of a straight. It's got great top line speed, but it doesn't get the power down as well coming out of a corner. The rev range, because of the turbos needing time to spin up, it's limited. So at Brands Hatch, you haven't got the length of the straight really to play to its strength. They want a much longer straight, because just finally, when they've got that speed, it's time to get on the brakes and turn into the next corner. So that's work in progress in a sense, but it's a much improved car from last year. There is optimism, but they'd like the straights here to be longer.
Yeah, one of the big changes to the car, let's leave the power unit aside, there's been a big revision on the front end aero pack, and that has contributed greatly to the car's overall performance. I mean, always with a turbo engine, it's a question of how quickly can you get the turbos to spool up, how quickly can you get them to deliver the boost that you want to drive the car out of a corner. So, I think that may well be. I want to see Lorenzo Patrese. That's really what I'm anxious to see, because he was so impressive at Monza.
Saw his dad yesterday. Ricardo was here.
Well, Lorenzo Patrese, the car currently is quickest. That was because of the times Alex Arca set. So number 99, this is the 41. No, sorry, 69, that's the Ferrari, what am I talking about? So that is Albert Costa.
And the car is third fastest. Incidentally, I'll stop going on about track limits in due course, but the track limit warnings come to the car, not to the driver, so you could penalise your teammate by your own over-eagerness. So we've now got 27 minutes of the session to go, and now we have the potential of the full 29 strong grid being out on track, and this is where people are going to go, it's busy, it's traffic, there's no gap, can't do a time. But it's inevitable, and they're going to have to manage that in qualifying, because qualifying around here to get a good grid position, I know it's obvious, but it is absolutely crucial, because it is tough to overtake around here, and if the forecast remains as dry and as good as it does for Sunday, then you don't even have that variable of the weather to shuffle the order.
So Albert Costa coming out of Graham Hill Bend, and probably that's about as acceptable as anything's going to be in terms of how you run the exit of the corner. So always a star and exciting to watch when he was in the ML3 Lamborghini lineup. Now in a Ferrari, which is probably a more sophisticated chassis, because this has always been part of the Ferrari philosophy that they make a road car that is actually a race car, then they develop it into a road car. The Lamborghini was a road car which they've developed into a race car. But it's bouncing, a lot of vertical movement as it comes through. That isn't going to be very comfortable or ideal. So I don't know whether the team want to get back in the garage and have a thought about how they might want to put some rebound or more control into that vertical movement, because certainly through Westfield, it didn't look particularly comfortable.
So this is a Costa Express at the moment, isn't it? Because Albert Costa at the wheel heads up towards the line looking rapid. He'll break the beam, but I don't think he's going to go quicker on that lap. Looking at the sectors now, he stays third. Right, all 29 cars have now ventured out on track. We've got times to come from 2, but the road is busy.
Who's gone purple?
It'll be Raffaele.
Correct.
On his first flying lap.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is in Sector 2, so that's now been eclipsed. In fact, the car has gone 25th, fastest overall in Sector 2, so the message is clear and obvious.
Yeah.
That Mercedes number 88 with Raffaele Marcello behind the wheel will be a force.
Right, 32 then. We talked about the car sitting in the garage. It is now out on track. The triple champions of Charles Weerts and Dries van Thor. Charles Weerts is the man behind the wheel of it, and he gets a wheel onto the dirt coming into Sterling's. Remember, that's the part of the circuit where race director Alain Adon was saying, keep off the curb, keep off the grass. But that was a tiny, tiny little slip.
Yeah, but again, keep repeating it, the grass is sodden. And even catching it by that very small margin was enough to destabilize the car, make Charles Weerts have to get out of the throttle, put on a little opposite lock, and think, oops, log that in my little memory bank, not to do it again.
Right, Marciello then is, as predicted, on a mission. It's purple, and this will be the first proper lap out of the session for Raffaele Marciello to put a marker down. Look at this, and he's timed it to perfection, because although there is a car ahead, he won't catch it on this lap. Over the line goes Marciello, fastest of all, and that is not quite the perfect lap, would you believe, because it was green, not purple, in the last sector. But Marciello has done a 1:22.511. He's 8/10 quicker than anybody else. He can now hand the car over to Timur Boguslavski to say, right, that's what it's capable of, mate.
Well, you can see the traffic around the racetrack, some slowing down, some going out on exploratory laps. Raffaele Marciello catches all three, and of course this lap he's just going to try and clear them to ensure that when he comes up to the completion of what will be his fifth lap, as you look at the 32 coming out of Charles Verts is right on the edge of the exit of Graham Hill Bend. What's he going to do? Surtees here's on board with Charles Verts, so onto the down Pilgrim's Drop. That's the correct title. There's the compression. Then you can see how steep it is. You turn into Hawthorne, gets the nose in, listen to the throttle. Slams it down a gear. Oh, and who's in the gravel? Is that an Audi?
Oh, I think it's a Mercedes.
No, it's a
the Mad Panda Mercedes.
Oh no.
So that could well be a stoppage here to get Salman Autio out of the gravel. And I'm looking down at the starter's gantry. Alain Adon will have a look at this. It could possibly be covered under a full course yellow. So there's a yellow flag that is being displayed, and the session remains live for the moment, but it may not do for much longer. I mean, the danger is, if that car can get there, somebody else can.
Absolutely, and the danger is it's right in the target area.
Red flag.
If somebody goes off, yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when, because the driver's still on board. He doesn't want to get out of the car in case another car goes off. But likewise, if another car went off and caught the Mercedes, the driver's in the cockpit. So the smart and sensible thing to do is to do what we've just seen. A red flag gets thrown. What happens is the clock doesn't stop. We've got 20 minutes of the session remaining. So it's going to take, 6-8 minutes to get the car removed from that. You've got to get the vehicle there first of all, get the pull straps on it. And as you can see, it's well and truly buried.
And this takes me back to that earlier point for the pro teams about what they can achieve. They only got half an hour. They're going to lose, as you suggest, about 10 minutes because of this. So there's very, very little that they will achieve at the end of this session. There, you can see, is the orange one. Colours now adorning Audis. So Trezor, orange one, Mattia Drudi and Riccardo Feller's car. We saw, of course, Trezor with the car collection team last year. Orange one, previous backers of Lamborghinis.
Audis have always been successful here.
Yeah.
That's one. There's a number of cars, driver pairings that you look down when you see the entry list and think, well, I fancy a bit of that or a bit of the other. That car, I think that 40 Audi, given it gets a good qualifying position, could certainly have an opportunity, a podium result this weekend for sure.
Vincent Voss with his trademark flat cap in the background, looking at all the data. Into the pit lane, there comes the Yuki Nomoto Lamborghini. So the pit lane will fill up, and the race officials are already attending to the Mad Panda Mercedes, which I think may well have got there with a bit of help from Nomoto, because an incident between Nomoto and Salman Autio has been noted at turn 1. So all the signs are there that it was a nudge between the two cars that dislodged the Mercedes rather than a harmless spin. We might be able to piece it together, in fact, with replays, but we'll have a look. The car is being retrieved. Right, let's see what we can pick up. Lamborghini on the inside. Boom! Yeah, that was contact. There's not much argument there.
No, I mean, coming from the left across the front, there was just no room. The Lamborghini wasn't going to disappear, and as you can see, the consequence is the Mercedes ends up, and that was an avoidable incident, because I don't think the driver in the 90 needed to do that, frankly, because the Lamborghini was there, and that's the danger of Paddock Hill Bend. It's a one-line corner. If you get involved in a contact with another car, well, Jesse Salamento, it's that one I think might be down to you.
So, a rookie GT3 racer, another lesson learnt. He has driven in plenty of single-seater categories, F4 predominantly around the globe, but sports prototype races more recently. Right, clock carries on ticking. Charles Weerts has brought 32 into the pit lane, and Dries van Thor has been standing watching. He can now talk to Gemma.
Dries, obviously coming to Brands Hatch for the first time with the BMW, zero data, zero knowledge. How difficult is this going to be for you guys this weekend?
Yeah, it's not going to be the easiest weekend, I think, just in terms of making sure everything's prepared, that we know what we have to do, what we have to work on. It's the first laps we just did with the car, so yeah, we have to get as much data. The red flag doesn't help, but we have to get as much data as possible to try and learn as much as possible, as quick as possible. So it's going to be an interesting weekend, but I think we are well equipped to do a good job, and hopefully we can do a good job around here. I think it suits us a bit, especially the quick part on the track. So yeah, let's see.
Well, WRT have certainly got a lot of experience within GTs, and you as well.
Yeah, I can't really say that I don't have any experience anymore. It's starting to become, I'm not feeling old, but feeling I'm getting more experience, of course, every year. But yeah, the team, of course, is well equipped, well experienced. So it's not like we can blame it on that. So we just have to work hard this weekend, harder than usual, and I think then we will get the result we deserve.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
I think Dries has probably edged into being a stalwart now. That happens before you become old, but he's now a stalwart GT racer.
Yeah, he has established himself, and he is extremely established. But the big variant is, of course, coming here now with a totally different product, different thinking goes into the car. One was previously it was a V10 naturally aspirated. The BMW was a straight 6 turbocharged, twin turbocharged motor, and everything else, was as different one car to the other as you can get. The only thing that's maybe constant is that the top 2 drivers are both pro drivers, and both are in cars they've driven here in previous events. Raffaele Marcello is quickest. Christopher Mies in the 27 Audi in the Santalog Junior team is second quickest, but he's almost 7/10 of a second away. That's a long, long way.
Valentino Rossi woolly hat, Vincent Voss flat cap, Yves Weerts headphones you're looking at.
That's what you might call a power triplet.
Yeah. The power list, there they are. And it's testimony to all the results achieved by WRT that BMW came calling, wanting them to look after this factory program. So Valle heads to the pit lane. That means that Maxime Martin is aboard number 46, and you can see everybody queued up at the end of the pit lane. The fast lane has been open for a minute or so, and lots of the teams have sent a car down the pit lane to try to get to the head of the queue, to try to get through the traffic, to try to get clear track space as soon as possible. But we're not yet at the point of the green flag, because the recovery vehicle at paddock is still reversing back to its little resting place behind the barrier. So the gravel trap looks clear, but I promise you, because I can just see it out of the window, that reversing up the hill is the snatch vehicle, and there, coming out of Druids, is the Mad Panda Mercedes. Now that can relatively swiftly go off track. It doesn't have to do the whole Grand Prix circuit. It can go through the back door into the pit lane. That's your snatch vehicle out of harm's way anyway.
Yeah, so the Mad Panda Mercedes will be going in. Well, there's a cut through, usually the Indy circuit, and cut back into the pit lane. Well, actually, the cutback is just at the entry into Surtees, I should say. So the car ought to be back in the pit lane by now, or into that holding area just prior to the pit lane. And we expect the track to go green very shortly.
So the race control team, with all the CCTV cameras, will see the recovery truck peel off the road now. And so that's bypassing the Indy circuit. It used to be, was it Kidney Bend? It's on the inside, so the road is now completely clear. We should be good to go green any moment, and when we do so, it'll be at 15 minutes pretty much. That's where we are out of the hour. Green flag is shown, and we are back in business then as the cars rumble down the pit lane.
So Christopher Mies, first car back on track, so he'll gain momentarily an advantage, but of course by the time he comes up to complete his outlap, he'll be not a million miles away from the tail of the rest of the field, and bit by bit they're beginning to make their way down the pit lane, still waiting for the 32. That was Charles Fayette who took that car out. Whether he stays on board or whether Dries van Thor, who we saw briefly being interviewed by Gemma Scott down on the pit lane. There is 31. That's actually a bit deceptive because the Skechers car, the 32 and the 31 are very similar, you know, looking at a distance. So, okay. Well, we can do what do we call it, a phone order or whatever.
Deliveroo.
Deliveroo,
yes.
yeah.
That's your ultimate fast food, isn't it? The McDonald's backed GT3 car. It drops down. And BMW to go, please. And it goes. Right, Timur Boguslavski has taken over 88 from Raffaele Marciello. So a little bit like we were suggesting, Raffaele went out, set a benchmark lap. Yep, car's fine, that's what it's capable of. Off you go, Timur, who had a rather torrid journey here yesterday. But he finally got to the circuit through all sorts of aviation-related dramas. But he can now settle himself behind the wheel. 27 Audi, second fastest. This is the Gregoire de Moustier and Christopher Mies entry of Santalot. Gregoire de Moustier returning to top-level GT racing rather than GT4 after many, many years away. He's been off doing World Rallycross and TCR, but he's come back into GT racing. And Christopher Mies, we know he's massively experienced, massively successful, and he is at the wheel of the car right now. And then third fastest is Lorenzo Patrese.
And that was the time set by Alex Arca currently. So Lorenzo, who I thought was wonderfully impressive in Monza, and I mean, I think it was 17 or something, 17 years old. I mean, he's got the maturity of his father when his father was about, yeah, well, a bit older anyway.
Yes, yes.
Actually, probably a better head than Ricardo had. Ricardo was a little bit on the wild side in his early days, but became a much more accomplished and extremely capable driver. Again, the McLaren, just watching coming through Westfield. I don't know, are there more bumps in Westfield? You ran the circuit last night. Did you notice it where you're springing and damping and roll bars all okay when you're doing that run, David?
I just put the aches and pains down to old age, but it doesn't feel more bumpy. But you're right, it certainly feels like a roller coaster watching the cars.
Yeah, well, the McLaren certainly looked at, we saw the Ferrari 296, Albert Costa particularly, it looked like there was a lot of vertical movement in McLaren. Similarly, so Timo Boguslavski behind the wheel had a pretty difficult race in Monza, probably one he'd like to forget. I'm sure we won't have Gemma remind him of it, but she might get to speak to him in the pit lane. And he just needs to go out, get a number of laps under his belt, re-establish his confidence and familiarity and feeling it with the 88 Mercedes, and then just go and do the job he's there to do.
So we have the cars then with, what, 11 more minutes still to go.
Christian Klein, currently that car, 26th. So Christian Klein, Sector 1, nothing that's going to say, I'm looking to see an improvement. Benjamin Goethe behind in the 1-4, and that's off at the exit. That's not Christian Klein.
That's Nicola Marinangeli.
Yep.
He's lost it coming out of Sheen Curve, and the problem now, John, to interrupt him, is of course that there is friction-free grass. It's wet. He's got himself probably beat. You can see the witness marks on the road where it's gone left and right. Had a real old tank slap.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a really, really interesting bit of rubber laying on there, but he's probably stalled it.
Yeah. I mean, even if he can fire it up, he's got to get it off the wet grass and he's got to find a gap in the traffic. I'm not optimistic here, so I fear that's going to get bogged down and this could be another interruption. But we shall see, because there's not much lock, there's not much visibility when you side on, so it goes very, very sideways back to the drifting, but he doesn't save this when it goes around on him.
Yes. Of course, a modern race car doesn't have a clutch pedal. One of the downsides of having, electronic gear changing and all that is there's no clutch pedal and there's no hand clutch in these other. I don't think there's a clutch pedal, is there?
I think so.
No. Anyway, he's caught on the wet grass. The best way is to go forward and try and do a big arc and come back onto the track reversing onto the racetrack, I would not advise.
Red flag.
Yeah, and we've now got just over 9 minutes of the session remaining, so probably we're going to get, if we get any running before this 1 hour session concludes, it's going to be very brief. So he's actually done, he's got it rolling, almost to the point where he got one wheel onto the tarmac.
You can see the in-car marshalling system. So there, the red light flashes. That's the flag signal around the circuit. So the drivers have no excuse. It's all very well saying, I didn't see the flag because I was busy. Well, it's in the car, it's there blinking at you. There's no reason not to see it. If you were thinking, why did it take relatively a long time to put a red flag out? Well, just to give race directors in plural a fair crack of the whip here, assuming the car had stalled, the start process takes about 30 seconds really for the car to calm itself down after having been hot and to then go through that start cycle. So often a race director will give it a good half a minute or so, and if it can't move after that, then okay, we have an issue, we need to resolve it. But rather than do a knee-jerk, oh, stationary car, red flag, they will give the driver time to go through that start cycle of switching everything off they need to, switching everything back on, going all the way down through gears, going up, however it needs to work. And then, okay, we've given it long enough, it ain't moving, now we need to step in. But they will give the driver the opportunity and the time to try to do it themselves rather than stop a session.
So the car has now returned to track under its own steam, and hopefully we'll actually be able to get this session concluded. But everybody's going to have to go back into the pit lane because we're still under red flag conditions, and 50 kilometers per hour driving back to the pit lane, you feel you could probably walk quicker. So Albert Koss comes up to the scene of the incident, and he might see those marks on the track and think, wow, who did that? Where is it? Well, it's all clear, and you know, for everybody, we're going to lose certainly minimum 5 minutes between the red flag being issued to the point when the track will go green again. So we may get about 3 minutes, if you're lucky, one out lap and one flying lap, and that'll be session over.
The teams are being told of a restart on short notice. In other words, as soon as we can, we'll go. Raffaele Marciello is the driver with the fastest time of the session. The car is in the pits with Timo Boguslavski at the wheel of it, which means Raffaele is free to talk to Gemma.
Lello, clearly setting the fastest lap. Didn't need a lot of time in the car for yourself, giving most of it to Timo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite experienced, let's say. We're coming to Brands Hatch since 17 when I'm in GT, so I mean, I like the track, I like the place, and then for sure Timur is the one that needs a bit more time, so we let him drive a bit more.
You're becoming quite the local here in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite often here and I'm get used to the weather, but I mean, it's always nice tracks here. There are, I mean, still a bit of track limit issue, but not as much as other places. All tracks tight, very nice.
It's quite important to keep yourselves off the grass this weekend as well, isn't it? Because it's so wet, you get bogged down so quickly.
I try to stay away from the grass every time, so yeah.
Have a great weekend. Thanks, Lello.
The incident that caused our first red flag, that was the Salmonadio Nomoto clash at paddock. No further investigation necessary, say the steward. So they've had a look and that's it. Yep, racing incident. We are back live with just under 6 minutes to go. It's going to be a bit harum-scarum this, but again, everybody goes pouring out. Traffic's an issue.
Yeah, yes, I mean, either you're the first car out on track, which I think is Timo Boguslavski in the 88 Akodis ASP team, Mercedes AMG GT3. Oh, I'm almost out of breath saying all that.
It's a good job it's an hour session, yeah. Boguslavski has won championships in Fanatec GT. He's not slow. It's a little bit unfair in a way that he's always benchmarked against Marciello, who is an absolutely outstandingly fast driver, but Boguslavski is no slouch.
Absolutely not. It just, I think Raffaele Marciello mentioned it in the interview with Gemma, saying he needs a little bit more time than I do, both in terms of track time in the car, but also because of a disappointing, let's say, outcome at Monza. I think he needs to rebuild confidence and give himself the kind of knowledge that I have the ability, I've got the speed, I just want to go out now, drive myself back into that window, that zone I know I can operate in, because I've won here with Raffaele Marciello.
So Boguslavski's lap times, well, we'll start to see exactly what he can come up with, because The best is a 22.5. He's got to get near that, because we did see on occasions last year the difference in pace and what it did to the race results between a Marciello qualifying effort and a Boguslavski effort.
Well, the difference between the two drivers is Marciello has got the ability to put this car on pole position anywhere, any day, any racetrack, whatever. Timo Boguslavski hasn't got that, but he can do an extremely good job in the race, and his job is to consolidate let's say the first stint that Marciello has done. And given that Marciello could lead this race from the moment the lights go out, hand it over to Timo Boguslavski. Boguslavski is good enough, we know that, to bring the car home in first position.
So this lap for Timo Boguslavski is going to be a start-up lap, effectively. You can see in the sectors he's lost a big chunk of time in the middle. But then again, he's not chasing pole position. What he wants to do is get himself happy in that car, dialed in. Timo Boguslavski, who concentrated on sprint last year, this year he's doing both sprint and endurance elements to Fanatec GT Europe. And we've had 71, of course, causing that most recent stoppage, Nicola Malinangeli. That is Salman Altio and Compact's Mercedes back into the pit lane after its gravelly moment earlier on. And Salman Altio, who's not been here before, is still doing the driving duties. Ezequiel Perez Compact knows the circuit better, so he's happy to effectively give up a session for his co-driver, bring him up to speed.
So the car is going to be pushed back into the garage. There's obviously 4 wheels and tyres off, and they're not going to replace those. So push the car in. There may be a residue of the gravel from Paddock Bend wedged in various parts of the car. So they want to clear that all out. And as we look at the 488 Ferrari, as opposed to this is the where am I looking down? The F Corsa entry, as opposed to the 296. 488 is the twin turbo V8, which is so successful over previous seasons. The 296 is the latest and greatest out of Maranello, and no doubt will go on and be as successful, possibly even more successful.
So Yuki Nomoto, who was one of the first drivers out at the start of the session, the silver graded driver then in the Silver Cup, comes up the hill towards us and heads to Dingledale, riding on board with him now then. The session has got 1 minute and 3/4 still to run. Gilles Magnus, incidentally, has been the last improver in Audi number 21, next to the Conti Racing cars. Nomoto looked quick up to the line, and 20.60 was at the start of the lap, and the lap time was not an improvement. So still circulating. Driver change between Martin and Rossi. So 46 ready to blast back out again. Very well when the engine refires.
So they've dropped it off the jacks, and now it's back up again.
Yeah, Maxime Martin brought it in. And maybe they're just using these last few minutes to do practice pit stops. So you've done one, drop the car down, pick it up again. So practice pit stop done, we can now put it back into the garage. Maybe that is what they are doing, rather than going out with only a minute or so to go. You couldn't do a flying lap, but just do a practice pit stop and then park it. Again, one of the joys of the free practice session is trying to second guess what the teams are doing, because not everybody, of course, will go for a time. There are all sorts of things, whether it's setup, whether it's finding out how long it is to drive through the pit lane to factor that into pit stop times, whether it's scrubbing in tyres, whether it's learning about the circuit, all sorts of things that have to be ticked off the to-do list, especially when it's a new car and when you're new to a circuit.
Yeah, and this is a 2-day event, so there's a lot less running time than maybe at an enduro event, so it is all compressed into a tight schedule. So any unnecessary issues, this is a car that was going quick, in fact is going very quick. 1:23.1, fastest overall time in sector 3 on that last lap. This lap 2/10 and a bit, a quarter of a second down. But Christopher Mies, certainly in that final sector, purple, didn't quite expect that at this stage, but just indicates just how effective the Audi is around Brands Hatch.
Yeah, Audi saying it's going to withdraw from sports car racing at the end of the season, but still capable of building quick cars, and this, which is run by the Santaloc team, a very, very rapid proposition, hence its second fastest. It does look a bit like watching a very fast runoff area at the moment, given its colour scheme, but Christopher Mies very nearly camouflaging himself there, running wide, coming out of Sheen Curve, accelerates now out of Sterling's. He's pulled back time in the middle sector, goes a little bit wide, but gets away with it. Now, Mies has been around here often enough in Fanatec GT and its forerunners to know exactly what the circuit is like. This could be an improvement then, with that improved middle sector time. A good third sector is going to be absolutely imperative. He breaks the beam, and the net result is stays second. It was a 23.219, so not as quick as the car had gone earlier, but even so, that, interestingly, is an Audi that is very much showing it's a force to be reckoned with this weekend.
Very much so. I mean, the middle sector time was the fastest middle sector time for that car over the 1 hour period. So Christopher Mies, whether in this piece here on the entry to Sterling, all the way down to finishing, going across start-finish line. He ran slightly wide. You can see caught the dirt on the outside. Previously, that curb used to be a much more aggressive curb, and if you dropped a wheel over it, it would frequently just rotate the car very quickly indeed and throw you off to the left. So Christopher Mies, who knows the circuit absolutely like anybody does, used that, but slightly slower in that final sector than he maybe had anticipated.
So the teams arrive back. You can see 1 or 2 drivers there, like Charles Weir, still suited and booted. So at the end of the session, the car will come in. They'll do a practice pit stop. We're seeing it here again within Acodis ASP. So you can't be on track, but you can use this time usefully. Bring the car in, do a practice pit stop, and we know that this is where WRT scores. So interesting that the other teams are taking this opportunity to hone skills to try to save another 10th or 2 against WRT for tomorrow. I
would give Acodis ASP 2 thumbs up for that one, because that was almost poetry in motion. I mean, if you want to do a time and motion study review, that's about as good as, I say, a pit stop wheel change can get.
So let's have a quick look at the times then at the end of the session. This is effectively per car rather than identifying individual drivers in a majority of cases. But Raffaele Marciello it was who did do the time for number 88. Christopher Mies second, and then Alex Arca's time for third, Frank Bird for fourth, Alberto De Falco and Aurelian Panis we didn't really touch on, but they got fifth ahead of Albert Costa. Reigning GT4 champion Erwin Bastard joining Patrick Niederhauser to be seventh ahead of Matthew Drudi and Riccardo Feller. Consta Lapalainen and Giacomo Altue's Ferrari ninth, and Fred Vervies and Nicholas Bart rounding out the top 10. 12th, the reigning champions, indeed the triple champions in Sprint Cup, Charles Weerts and Dries van Thorberg. Do not think this is going to represent qualifying. It's going to be a very different order when we get to qualifying later on. There's pre-qualifying to come, and then the qualifying session itself later on in the day. A little bit further back, you can see who else has been doing times. So we'll look forward to pre-qualifying for this afternoon, and when we have the cars on track, it'll be 12:45 for pre-qualifying, and then qualifying is going to be 5 to 4, 20 minutes Q1, race 1 grid, 10-minute break, 20 minutes for Q2. Right, let's go to the pit lane. Gemma has been busy finding drivers. Christopher Mies had a good morning, didn't he?
Chris, you got out the car there with a well-deserved big smile on your face. Happy with that performance?
Yeah, obviously it's my first outing with Team Scientology in Sprint Cup, so I'm pretty happy and satisfied with P2. Obviously it was a tricky session with all the red flags coming out, but still happy. Car feels good, everyone is happy.
Feels like Santaloc, a team that we're going to be looking out for heavily this year. Is this particularly here in Audi circuit?
Well, I think from the past, especially a Merc and Audi track, yeah, definitely. But you know, every year someone comes with an update, they improved over winter, so you're never really sure if you still have the same pace as last year. But obviously, right now we have still the pace from last year, and I'm really happy about that.
Well, have a great weekend. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you.
Second fastest, 0.6 of a second back from Raffaele Marciello. So the cars in the pit lane, the cars in the garages, and they will be good to go, of course, for that pre-qualifying session. Data now will be studied, tweaks will be made, and of course those pro teams, Dries van Thor touched on it, they only got half the session anyway, and then it was interrupted with the Ferrari's dramas up at the exit of Sheen Curve, so limited running. It does illustrate in this real hotbed of GT3 racing who the good teams, good drivers are that can suddenly deliver as required on the flick of a switch, really, with so limited running. Pre-qualifying next, there is the Valentino Rossi Maxime Martin BMW, and somewhere there is an engine after all, John.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find it. I mean, the bodywork, I mean, the carbon fibre on these cars, and there, somewhere, is the engine. I mean, whoever takes the basic product, the M4, BMW M4, and transforms it into this, I mean, a name, just amazing.
The Audi we're familiar with, that's the car that's second fastest down at Saint-Eloi. Christopher Mies doing the gun time. Let's look back then at an interrupted hour of free practice for the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Sprint Cup's opening round. Green flag, and it was for the silver and the bronze. In other words, the silvers only. Out they went, and straight away attention was on the number 46 BMW and Thierry Vermeulen in Ferrari number 69, who was looking rapid early on. Yes, it's Armin Alfio for Mad Panda Motorsport did the bulk of that session, despite a trip into the gravel, assisted as he was by Yuki Nomoto. Both spun, the Lamborghini got away with it, the Mercedes was less fortunate. That brought out the first of 2 red flags while the car was retrieved, but once the session got back underway, it was for a limited period before we had this drama that befell Nicola Marinangeli coming out of Sheen Curve. Around he went, and although the car was undamaged, it did result in another stoppage while the car was retrieved. Christopher Mies was looking rapid aboard number 27 Audi. In the end, that car got up to second, but it was 88 Mercedes. Raffaele Marchiello went out and did one very short run indeed. That was enough to put the car at the top of the times and illustrate that, as ever, he is going to be a real force to be reckoned with this weekend. Tibor Bogoslavski then took over the driving duties for the remainder of the session. So it's looking good for Mercedes, and it's looking good for Audi at the end of free practice here at Brands Hatch. 12:45 local time, the cars are back on track. We'll see you later for more track action. Bye for now.